this cycle of like duty on the heating, cooling, electricity, the energies is much higher, much more frequent in also a much smaller space. You'll have 4 to 5 touch points for that person for the space, where at home they only have 2 touch points, which is morning and evening.
Welcome to the GOAT Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Cassinan. At GOAT, we define sustainability through the lens of intentionality, circularity, and community. With this framework, any problem can be solved. The stories that we share, the pioneers that we talk to, show us a different way to build the future we all want to have.
We're at a pivotal moment where nuclear is needed more than ever. Let's once and for all become a circular economy.
Waste is not cost neutral. Like, it always costs your business something. So if you can get rid of that, then that's good for business as well.
There's this dissonance. We talk a really good game about protecting the ocean, but the purchase decisions that we make don't match with our espoused values.
An ideal food system revolves around relationship. Where is my food coming from? Who's growing it? How is it being grown? And why does that matter?
Thanks for being here. Let's dive into the conversation. Levar, I'm really excited for this conversation just because, for one, I was in a hotel last week and I literally couldn't stop thinking about our first conversation about how hotels are designed and hospitality. Like, I walked into the room and it completely shifted my entire mindset around staying in a hotel, which I found incredibly interesting. And that's what we can definitely bring to this conversation. But I wanted to start actually with art. So, you have more of an art background. Is that how you kind of led into the hospitality industry, and what kind of interested you in art from the beginning?
Something that's interested me in art, it's connecting the people with the space. It's giving them a place to connect to visually. Hotels, in fact, have a rule of saying that every certain number of feet or degrees of vision, there should be something there. Some hotels really abide by it, because if you don't, you're just gonna get a white room. It's gonna look like a jail cell. And it's a fairly intense jail cell. And I like to go back to you as a guest. So as you came to the room, what did you do? You turn on the lights, you change the temperature, you close the windows, close the blinds. So do you like to take a shower with the door open?
So that kind of depends, honestly. So usually closed, but that's just out of more habit. But sometimes open if it's like a bigger hotel room, I guess, if that makes sense.
Well, don't do that,
Yeah.
because it destroys everything. Particularly the art. So when you come in, you're violently changing heat, humidity, and lighting, and it really does a number on the art. So the art has to have specific kinds of coatings to keep them from degrading fairly quickly. Even like the prints, they all have this. They call them dream stuff. Like, everybody has a catchy name for their coatings, but they're highly toxic and they're really bad for the environment. So is it more sustainable to have something that lasts longer than have something that you have to throw away frequently? Um, so art had always been a way of my self-expression. It was something that I had always done. I started my company that sold art to hotels because I took a trip to London and Paris, and I was doing more photography and a kind of fine art photography. And I the first hotel that I sold to was the Copley Square Hotel in Boston, but now it's a Westin Copley Square, Copley Square. I know the Boston people are going to have a fit over that. Um, but uh, and I distinctly remember talking to the GM and the owners, and they were like, "Yeah, whatever, I'll put you on a list." And I thought they were done with me. And a couple of weeks later, they were like, "Get down here and get the art done." And I was like, "Okay." And the reason they picked me, and I asked after I signed the paperwork, don't ask someone why they're hiring you before they hire you. You'll sink the deal. They said that the an artist was being an artist and was holding up a multi-million-dollar project, and they needed the work done now. And I got, God, that was 160 rooms done within 2 to 3 weeks. But I had the pipeline set up where the print shop was ready, the framing shop was ready. We got some canvas stuff ready. Um, I always think that art is fairly underrepresented as and underappreciated, and particularly as a way of making a living. You're always supposed to be a quote unquote starving artist. Like everyone should be able to make a living off of what they do. Particularly when the places are paying you. It's not like I'm like scooping up, I don't know, like dirt on the sidewalk. That might be some different. No, that's sanitation. You should get paid for that. Um, I don't know. I've been very connected to sustainability and art, and I'm trying to always like fuse the two together. Um, but the ROI is not there. So when I first started, I found this canvas that was the end coating that was recyclable, so you can reclaim the art. Normally, if the piece of art, so the things in the lobby are well temperature controlled. Even though you're opening up and closing the doors a lot, the temperature is fairly well controlled compared to a room where you're like, hey, you want it to be 50 degrees. And when you leave, housekeeping comes in and undoes everything that you did. And then the cycle continues over and over again. So that those pieces in the lobby can be resold, even with kind of the standard frames, the standard set. When I found that recyclable art, bases, it was only about a penny more per square foot. In the 15 years I was in business, not a single hotel bought that line, because you got only a penny more. They're very much numbers people, and there's no direct ROI on why they should spend that money. It's gonna go in the garbage. They don't care. So that led me into joining into the green industry during COVID. So COVID hit and it threw me for a loop. And I was like, I want to do something different. I have this stuff in my mind that's rattling around. Um, and when I rattled around in my mind, I'm like, hey, one of a colleague said, hey, I'm getting to the green industry. Let's go at it. Let's do carbon credits. And I entered one of the worst markets I have ever, never been proud to say that I did. It is. So I'm going to state very nicely, very cleanly, so I do not get in trouble. But there are highly useful and highly effective carbon credits, and there's a whole league of carbon credits that are highly ineffective and at worst disingenuous. And sorry, at best disingenuous, at worst fraud. And it's kind of like there's a lot of crypto fraud. Like there's some that are fantastic, and there's some that are going to jam you up. I saw that world, and I said, no. If I'm going to be in this world, I'm going to be in sustainability. I want to make an actual impact. And looking at hotels as a whole are so far behind. I still read like in the industry news, hotels claiming like, oh, we're finally gone to 100% LED lights. I had LED lights in my house 20 years ago. As individuals, in fact, we stopped selling incandescent lighting for residential in the US. What was it, 10 years ago? We weren't allowed. Why are hotels so far behind? It's the ROI. Why should they spend more money on this light bulb? Electricity is fairly cheap cost comparative to what they make in revenue. Um, so how about we go in and I go in and actually change that? Like make it more profitable by being sustainable and impactful than not being sustainable and impactful. Then I started thinking about the impact part and how easy it is for a hotel to have an impact with very little effort. So we're starting to get very used to asking how this was made, which is sustainable. Like, hey, where did this come from? But now we just have to ask the question, who made this? Am I buying a fabric that's sustainable, but then it's child labor or slave labor that is used to make that fabric? No, that's not sustainable, not for the people and not for the planet. All you need is a couple of bad actors, and the PR on that, no, it'll kill the market. Um, for instance, when you're in the hotel, did they give you the little bottles, or that you had the big bottles?
Yep. They gave the little bottles.
Okay, so I am a proponent for little bottles because I'm a New Yorker, so everything's a scam. Um, I'll tell you a hilarious story where my New Yorker came out in Japan where someone was trying to help me, and I was like, "Scam alert!" Um, but For the bigger bottles that are attached to the wall, there's a tamper. There's some of them may be tamper proof, but there's still a element of tampering that tampering could happen. Only thing somebody needs to do is put some Nair in a. I don't want to give people ideas. Please don't do this. Do not attribute this to me. All you have to do is you can tamper with it and put Nair in like a shampoo bottle. You use a guest uses the shampoo bottle, goes bald, and now it's bad press. So when they give you the little bottles, those bottles should be compostable. It should be like made from like, bamboo, or should be made from things. So yeah, there's some things that we should not sacrifice, which is cleanliness. I'm huge on that. We just got out of a pandemic. Let's not roll back into another one because we decided like we don't need to wash sheets anymore because it's sustainable. It's not sustainable when there's like bodies piling up. So that's
Well, and when you start looking at the hospitality industry, I mean, it is a massive, massive industry. I mean, the hotel business alone, I mean, in every single city, every single place, I mean, there's places for people to stay. Airbnb arguably kind of has a little bit of market share in that, but largely it's still hotels. Where do you start with that? Because you have the bottles, you have the art, you have the space management, you have the power management, you have LEDs. I mean, it seems like there's almost like this endless amount of changes that you can make. Where do you start with it? And then also, why are they so far behind? I mean, part of it's ROI, of course, but if you invest a little bit up front, your returns start being made immediately. So if they're 20 years behind, why is it taking so long?
So, where to start is always the key energies. So you need heating, cooling, electricity. That happens no whether you're at home or whether you're at a hotel. So those are things I always say start with. So how can I provide this for as little impact on the people or planet, and if I can give that stuff back. And so yeah, so you're saying like we have all these things, but because hotels we issue very large contracts, we can move an industry very quickly. When I'm looking at the textiles for this hotel that's coming up, that is a $4 million contract easily. If I say, hey, I'm not going to use that, I only use this, someone's going to rise to the occasion. So it's a little bit of forward thinking. There's a lot of thinking in particularly around I've had conversations with investors where why bother if this works and this makes us money, why do we need to go another step further and do that? So they see sustainability and impact as a liability, not an asset, and it's an asset. um, Climate change is a corporate liability just as much as it is a personal liability. So we're very focused on the individual that they have to do this. Their homes are getting washed away in storms, but also hotels are being washed away. They're down the road. Even New York City. I live in New York City, and we've been getting these really torrential downpours we've never had before. I've lived here for 30 years, more than 30 years. I was born here, and there's like I've never seen it rain this hard this frequently, almost like monsoons. So it's like flooding the trains, and everybody's seeing these things, and there's very people focused, but hotels are being knocked out too. Commercial properties are being knocked out as well. So yeah, it's flooding people's basements. Terrible. We should always focus on people, but also put into light that now um, the Brooklyn Zoo, Prospect Park, is closed and had been there since the 1800s because it was flooded in the last storm, and they were like, we can't do anything. Like we don't have the money to redo this. It's done. So it's just as much a corporate responsibility and liability as is the personal one. And then you have the creations of those things. The For carbon emissions, it's almost all corporate. 20% comes from the individuals. It's almost all corporate emissions damaging the planet. So even if we did each individual around the world does exactly what they're supposed to do, only 20% is ever affected. If everyone stops driving, everyone stops doing this. Individuals, we do need that, but we also have to have the corporate backing to do that as well. And if you have to do that, you have to pass this by the investors. So if I say I'm making us more money, everyone's going to do it anyway. That's how you make the sea change, and that's what I'm here for. So I'm also not particularly. I don't think I'm particularly smart, but I invented things. Invent things, people. Everyone get into it. I know it's a really high barrier to get into the patent things, and it's a really corrupt system, and it costs quite a bit of money. But if I can do it, everyone else could do it. So I invented this key energy system, which effectively is a as close as to a zero waste system as you can. So getting the waste and then putting it to another use. So if there's extra heat somewhere, why isn't that going to heating the hot water? If there's extra cooling somewhere, why isn't that going to pre-chilling restaurants, pre-chilling rooms? The energy use delta is like a parabola. So when you're going from 80 degrees, to 70 degrees, is much less than if you went from 90 degrees to 70 degrees. So if you can pre-chill spaces or pre-warm spaces with ambient energy, ambient energy, but so whether it's from the sun, whether it's from ground source, whether it's from an actual basement. So if you go in your basement, it's always 50 degrees here. You could actually build a pre-chilling thing in the summer to help bring that air up. Also passive uses of those. When I mean ambient, I mean passive. Um, if you can maximize that, then you're not spending all this money on for a hotel. We'll break it down. So you're not spending the money on the actual energies themselves, so the heating, cooling, and electricity. But you're not spending money on maintenance of those systems because they're not overly complex. So you're bringing down the maintenance costs. You're also bringing down the cost of those appliances. You don't need a heat pump in every single room if you do it in a very specific way. Heat pumps are fantastic. We should absolutely use them. Um, but for a hotel, if that heat pump in that individual room goes out and needs to be fixed or needs maintenance, that room is done. You don't. That's inventory that's sitting there. That is now a negative because it's also costing money to do the maintenance. So if I say, hey, I'm creating this system that doesn't cost a lot to run, in fact, produces electricity and heating and can provide that to community, and that is a revenue source as well, but also providing something in a sustainable manner that then lowers our maintenance and also our maintenance intervals. I'm making money on this system than if you put up a bunch of solar panels and that's all you did, because you're also wasting 100% of the heat energy that hits the roof. I can't get into this over.
Well, and so when you start looking at how things are holistically, I mean, you were in the carbon credit industry, so obviously you understood kind of the carbon aspect of everything. The fact that it comes from corporations more so than individuals, that it's on the corporations, it seems like it's beneficial for the corporation to kind of make the shift and the change. Is it the ease of entry to make that change? Is it seeing the benefit that, hey, let's lessen the point of failure? Because if you don't have to replace heat pumps and you don't have to do these things, those are points of failure that just keep going wrong and wrong and wrong. It's minimizing the system to make sure if you do fail, it's only one thing and that's easy to fix. It doesn't take down inventory. Is that kind of the tipping point for like a lot of the corporations? It's like removing the other points of failure so that way there's nothing more than that? Or is it actually just bringing in new systems? Because when you look to renovate a hotel, obviously that is way more costly than just keeping it status quo, right?
Yes. So this is the tipping point. Exactly how you said it. There's a mind shift that has to shift in investing because I'm like very much about this. I still have to fight. I have to convince the investor that the money's there. So I have to do all these like performers, and there's a lot of things me and my CFO have to go through, and he's gonna have an emotional breakdown. Um, uh, but we have to do it. So then, once you do it once, and it proves that it's fantastic, and you make that extra money, then everyone's just gonna flow. And sometimes it's hard to break that barrier, but once that barrier is broken, because we broke the barrier. We've done it before commercially. The oh god, the HFCs in hairspray. They were causing a hole in the air, the ozone layer. We fixed it. We stopped using it from people all the way through the corporations, and the ozone healed itself, repaired itself. We can do it. We just have to make you have to make that breakthrough in that barrier. For the sustainable people, we have to stop focusing on we're taking away from you versus adding to your life, because when you're subtracting something from people, they're going to resist it. So you don't tell people they can't have meat. You tell them that they can have something, but it should be a locally sourced animal that is native to the thing, so that you don't have to pump them full of you don't have to pump them full of the hormones to get them. That's the issue with cows. Cows are not warm weather animals. They get very sick if they're warm. and they're in the Midwest for the U.S. and they require all this upkeep that normal. And if perhaps we're bison, of course, you eat less of the local animal, but that animal's already there. You don't have to force it. And it also should be something that an animal that eats things that we do not eat. It should never compete for us. For us. So rabbit is absolutely fantastic. They breed like crazy. You can absolutely, and they're lower carbon impact than say rice. Um, so we don't take from people. Just say like, we'll give you this instead of that. Don't say you're a bad person. Like, yeah, like at some point some things are bad, but you have to be the messaging around it has to change. We can't say like preaching from the high horse, you just make people get defensive. So you have to figure out how to like connect it. So I'm saying like, hey, this hotel could be built here, but we can also build it in a way that we don't use a lot of, we are a producer of sustainability. It is also a revenue stream for us. So then that hotel is less dependent on ADR, which is the, average daily rate, room rate. Um, and how can we shift that into other parts of the hotel as well? So when it comes to like I'm going to be very capitalist for a moment, and I understand because I am. So how do you make this a capture moment for money? So for instance, we have an algae growth system so that we can create then also for sustainability. Not one thing is going to fix it. There's no magic bullet. Our sustainability needs to be contextually based. So what's there, what's readily available, how do we maximize, whether it's sunlight, whether it's wave action, whether it's hydropower, and sometimes you may need nuclear power. Some places you don't get anything. So if you're very far north, very far south, solar panels are not going to work for 50% of the year. You'll get an abundant amount of power in the summer, in their summers, and then you're going to get absolutely no power in the winter. How do you bridge that gap? You may have to burn something to heat that home or that business or how do you? So if you're going to have to do that, how about you burn something that helps capture what it was doing? Of course, you could do trees, you could do biomass of algae. Maybe you're in a place that doesn't trees don't grow well, and how do you do that? So you bridge that gap. So you could use algae for that. You could also turn algae to alcohol. Um, I had a bout of algae, but I realized it's not being recorded. It's sorry. It is being recorded, but it is visually not being recorded. But so how do you move into the other sectors of hospitality? And so food sustainability is always a thing. Locally grown, fantastic. If you can't get it locally, you can grow it in a greenhouse. And guess what? If you have a south facing window, south and west facing windows, those are absolutely fantastic to have indoor gardens. Indoor gardens are fantastic. You maybe actually be able to grow things you not even during your grow season in your locale. You may be able to grow things that you're not able to grow. You can control the humidity much better. It's a lot less water waste, but it is maybe energy intensive for like grow lights if you don't have the amount of sunlight you need.
I find it fascinating that you're so on board with the contextual side of things, I think, and the positivity side of things, because so much of this industry very much is based in that, hey, 1.5 degrees C, world's gonna end, we're done, like forget it. Let's figure out better ways to do all this stuff, and so we can just barely survive. And instead, I mean, your perspective is really like, how do we thrive in this scenario? How do we actually take the things that are already existing and make them better? And I think that one of the more interesting parts about when you start thinking about things holistically, it's really about efficiency. I mean, I think that's what people forget is, I mean, even the petrochemical industry, when you look at that industry as a whole, they're incredibly efficient. Like zero waste in the entire supply chain. Now, what they're doing, hey, who knows? Might have some issues. But the fact that in their business model there's absolute zero waste, that is the mindset that almost all of us need to apply to whatever we do, because that's ultimate efficiency. It's use of resources. I love that you mentioned the localization of something, because yes, solar panels are a solution, but it's not the solution. And also depends on where you live. because it does drastically change the ability for a solution to actually be viable for a community. And I think that's when we started to look at, EVs at scale, for example. It can't actually work right now. Like it could in the future, but it can't right now because there's not enough infrastructure to actually support the energy usage that's needed. Where are you finding those limitations in the hospitality industry? Is it really just catching up to the curve, or are there, ceilings that kind of need to be innovated through when it comes to hospitality?
So you do have to innovate quite a bit, but there's also like a psychological barrier that we have to get through. So the innovation, I call a hotel an inside out TARDIS, whereas actually some things are very much more compressed than you would think at a home. So I'll take, you said you stayed in a hotel, perhaps you're, but like you maybe have a child. So three people or two people come into a hotel, that live together. They may live in 1,000 square foot home. All of your needs except for food, depending on, is highly compressed into a 300 square foot room. So you get a bathroom, you need your heating, your cooling for that. You need your HVAC system. You have frequently opening and closing doors. You close far more. You open and close the doors of the hotel room far more than you do at home. Usually you go to work, you close the doors, you leave, so that you can have a homeostasis. So you have to have a more powerful HVAC system in a than for 1,000 feet in a 300-foot room. I also, people love to steam their clothes and shower in their bathrooms at hotels. Please stop doing that. It wastes so much energy. But yeah, so I'm guilty of it too. But I was guilty of it because someone made a grilled cheese sandwich with the iron, and I plugged the iron in, and I smelled like food cooking, and I'm like, "Who's in here cooking?" I'm by myself, and I'm gonna press my suit to go to a conference, and I'm like, "It smells like the grilled cheese in here." And I smelled the iron. I was like, okay, now I have to steam my thing in the shower because it just, please don't do that either. There are psychological barriers. Um, Investors are the number one thing, because if you can convince an investor, they'll hold your hand and go through it. Impact investing is one of our most powerful keys, and one of my largest allies in this, because you can't be impactful while destroying the place that people live. So, you can give them a lot, but if, they're constantly flooding or there's like wildfires, I take in the US where we're having a water crisis, where particularly black and brown cities are running out of water. The water's not drinkable. And municipal water is not drinkable. We have to act on that. And that's because of climate change. Storms are happening that haven't happened in 100 years, are happening every 10 years. Forest fires that I've never seen rage. I'm in New York City. It's a forest fire raging in Canada, and the sky is orange, like it's like an apocalyptic, movie. Like that is like the sepia like tone to the sky. And I have asthma. I will absolutely die. Like I had to flee New York because I'm having asthma attacks over those couple of days in a frequent amount that I may have to go to the hospital. So I just left. Not everyone has the money or the means to leave. So you have to be, your impact has to start with sustainability, but it has to go beyond sustainability. Um, so textiles. So even if, so right now I'm wearing I live what I say. I'm not just a liar. I try my best, of course, to do fly. There's some things that we have to, apply. We can do right now. Some things you could do, like, do the 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 20 year plan. So planes are 20-year plan. Like the batteries are not good. They're super heavy. We can't get electric aviation off the ground yet. Perhaps it could be hydrogen, but that's going to be in a 10 to 20 year plan. Then you're going to have to wait for those airlines, jets to age out. You're not going to get someone who just bought a plane and turn around. The airline's going to like replace it a year later. They don't do that. It, so 20-year plan. What you could do now, energy, because that's, I can do locally. I have control over that at that hotel, because I'm making we're making the energy management systems and creation systems. Then 2 to 5 years is the textiles. The textiles, even if you get something that's highly sustainable, it could be dyed with something that's not sustainable. So you're getting that blue dress or that blue shirt, but if it was dyed with something with like chroma, it's going to devastate everything.
And blue
So even if,
specifically.
yes, yes. So, but I also about that life. I'm wearing a sweater that is made from seaweed. And I'm like putting it through the ringer because I'm like, I've washed it 14 times in the last 2 weeks, but this is a stress test. I've like put it in the dryer for way too long. I've like stretched it and pulled it. If this works as a sweater, why can't it work as a clothing, as a covering for a seating?
How's it holding up, by the way? Because
It's holding up fairly well.
yeah, because that's always what I wonder. A lot of these solutions, like the sweater I'm wearing, is made of Tencel, and like Tencel is biodegradable, and it's like you want to put it through the ringer of like stress tests to see like, does this actually work? Because I think when a lot of people try a quote unquote sustainable solution, they're like, oh, I'm doing good, and then it doesn't last as long. They're like, well, this isn't as good as the polyester one that I usually have, so I'm just going to go back to polyester. What does that look like?
So I think that loops back on the part where you add to people's lives, don't take away from it. So if that shirt doesn't last as long as the other shirt, now that's a negative, even though they're probably paying more for that sustainable shirt. So we have to do better with textiles, particularly around dyes. I'm looking at algae-based textiles. If anyone out there can do this, I want to be on it. Yes,
I can actually get you with the people that do.
yeah. So I'm 100% behind it. I live the things that I say. So particularly around like this is recorded but not visually, I have peppers growing in my house. I have the high use items. We'll get onto the agriculture side, the food side. So we're on textiles. Also with woods. If I perhaps this natural wood is more sustainable than because it comes locally, it's from a fast growing tree. You're not like clear cutting, you're doing it in an appropriate fashion. That would may be a better alternative than a synthetic thing. And those synthetic things are also made from oil. Is that virgin oil? Is that something that just came out of the ground or has it been recycled? Reclaimed? Yes. Good. Because it's going to take a long time for it to biodegrade. But if it's virgin oil that's coming out of the ground and you're making it into flooring or textiles, no, you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. You're encouraging and continuing to use oil in a way that we're supposed to be like, hey, let's stop. But we're making it, quote unquote, digestible because it's long lasting and we're like using oil from a different reason. No, you're still burning the carbon's still coming out of the ground. And at some point, the way the hotels are built, every 5 years you got to redo that hotel because if you fall backwards, if that hotel looks raggedy, no one's going to stay there. So then you're throwing that plastic stuff out. Is there a recaptured moment where someone else is coming along to reclaim that? No. If you as the manufacturer do not have a plan for your own products, why do you think someone else is going to come along, figure that out, and then build a business around it? And this is what happened with plastic recycling in the US. It wasn't profitable. It's never been profitable. But China was buying up our plastics and then throwing them away anyway. So it didn't really matter. But then the market of that fell out when China said, hey, we're not taking in any more plastic from anywhere around the world. The recycling market bottomed out. So we still get bottles and things. And so for longer lasting things, they should be glass. So keep them metal things, but disposable things, they should be bioplastics or bamboos or something like that that can decompose after a while. Like your shirt, it'll decompose after 4 to 5 years. I did it a lot on that question.
No, what's interesting. I think when you start to look at solutions, it's a hard one. Like when I'm still thinking about the wood side of things because like the home that I live in, it was wood. It's a craftsman built home from wood that was locally sourced from the island that I live on, and the person built it. And it was like this thought process that, hey, the wood's actually going to last longer. You have to take care of it, but it's actually wood. When you look at like the wood in the synthetic industry, it's like, no, let's go with synthetics because wood equals trees, which cutting down trees is bad. Like, where's that middle ground on that? Because I mean, you almost have this like look this way, look that way, and the consumer's just in the middle, like, I don't really know what to think. And even for the business too, because one might be a little bit more expensive, but they could be like, oh, the synthetic one doesn't take as much maintenance, so actually the payoff is going to be even better. but the wood one will actually last longer than the synthetic one if you're going to have to refresh it anyway. Like the hotel that I did stay in last week, it had an actual wood desk. Sure, it was dinged up a little bit, but it was actual wood, and I actually think it was nicer.
So it's you have to matrix this out. So longevity, how long this is going to last, where it came from, so how far it came away. So even if like you're using something recycled, if you're dragging it from halfway across the world, is that as sustainable if you got something a little bit more locally? And the life cycle of that product after, I call it the second life. What's going to happen to this afterwards? That wood is going to be there. Your wood house is going to be there for 100 years. You know, so it's less of an impact if you cut that tree down because you're not actually releasing that carbon back into the atmosphere. It's not going back to cycle. It's still locked down. But if you're going to take that wood and then a year later, like break the house down and throw the wood out, then that is probably the worst. You've got to you don't shoot this so far into an extreme that you end up painting yourself into a corner that then you can't get out of. So the plastic shirts. I go back to the story or the article that I read where this Norwegian town and Norway is number one in recycling, recapturing plastic. 99.9% of their plastic is recycled and recaptured. Um, the fad with the plastic shirts came in, and everyone started wearing the shirts that are made from recycled plastic bottles. Then the fish in their ocean, like their like local ecosystems started dying, and they couldn't figure out why. They looked through their gills, they started seeing microplastics in their gills, and they're like, "Hey, we don't put anything out; everything's recaptured. Where's this plastic coming from?" The mass of the plastic was coming from the plastic shirts that are being washed in their washing machines, and the microfibers were coming out into the water and then killing the fish. So the best of intentions can be fantastic, but also sometimes there's a knockdown. You can use the US as an example. Asbestos is such a good insulator of like temperature, but is absolutely terrible for us. So it'll like mental have mental defects all around. Like it's like the worst thing that we could do for ourselves as a species. Or like you could take it back to Roman times and lead pipes, fantastic. Those lead pipes last a long time. They're super sustainable. They don't degrade, but they're leaching water into the leaching lead into the water, and that's terrible for us. So you always have to try to like balance it, and it doesn't help that a lot of the effects are obscured. So a lot of the numbers are you can make numbers say whatever you want them to say, and it doesn't help with people who are greenwashing that are then using those numbers and washing them and making them look green and they're actually not. But then that then makes people less trustful of the system as a whole. So then you get distrust in sustainability because you're like, oh, they're just lying. There are some genuine mistakes. Sometimes you can only account for so much, and the outlier is like, yo, there's lead in the water. The Romans didn't know that. They didn't know what lead would do to us. But sometimes you go down, you give it an honest, yeah, I would say honest mistakes, and there's very ones that are very purposeful.
I mean, I always call it a patient urgency that you almost go about most problems. It's like there's an urgency to solve problems, whether that's for the profitability of the business, whether that's for the sustainability of the planet, whether that's for the well-being of the people that are in it. But at the same time, you have to be patient with it because sometimes if you rush into something, as you mentioned, you kind of paint yourself into a corner and you're like, uh-oh, now what? And it almost takes more to get out of that corner than it did if you just kind of approached it a little bit slower. I always love actually the saying slow is fast and fast is smooth. And it's that idea of like, how do we apply that type of mindset to what we're trying to solve in the problems that we do? Because if you build a structure that's going to last, 50, 60, 70 years, I think that's better than something that's only going to last 10 years. And so I think the interesting part about hospitality that you mentioned was that they have to refresh it every 5 years.
You'll get left behind. So there's the structure of hospitality. There's a lot of people telling you what to do. So you've got your investors, then you've got your clients, then you have the brands, and they have PIPs, which is called property improvement plans. So their PIPs are 5 to 7 years on the aggressive side. There's also, we have to stop fast fashion, and it includes hotels. So we'll get into the. Oh, Mara's gonna kill me with this one, but I'll allow some secrets. So, Marriott owns both the Westin and the W, right? The W is fashion forward. They've corrected this in the last 2 years, and they've moved away from it, and I'm very happy. And accolades to Marriott. Um, the W is fast fashion. Those bright pink walls. Like at one point, they had really bright pink walls and like neon lights in the like signs in the rooms. That's out of style. Nobody wants to do that. Those Edison lights, I'm done with those. Don't bring those near me. So they have the W because it's so fat, forward fashion or fast fashion focused that they have to replace the W's every 3 years to 5 years. But the Westin, because it's a classic hotel, they don't have to redo all the walls because it's like classically styled, like more longevity in mind. They don't refresh those for 5 to 7 years. But both of those hotels in the same city charge exactly the same. Who is making more money? It's the Westins. So Marriott, not because of sustainability, but because the money was there, they were like, hey, no, we're going to change this. We're going to make W's still a little bit edgier, but we can't be super edgy that we paint ourselves into a corner. We constantly have to redo things because if I go into a hotel room and I see those little neon lights saying welcome, like that's tired. I'm done. And then we're over it. Same thing with Edison lights. We're kind of over that. Um, so I that's why I link ROI so closely to sustainability because if the ROI is there, everyone's going to do it. So because they're not throwing all that stuff out every 3 years and have gone to a 5 to 7 year cycle, it is more sustainable now than it was before. It was all because of money.
So do you think timeless design is the answer to that? Because I think one of the interesting sides of fashion is always what is the future going to be, and is it necessarily, I mean, whether that's furniture, decor, clothing, textiles, whatever it is it thinking 2 and 3 years to keep the trend, right? Or is it literally, let's go timeless and not give consumer the option? Because one of the things that I always loved the most was that the original iPhone, there was only one of them. Like you either want this or you don't. And it went gangbusters. Everybody bought it. And I think that, I don't know, is that mindset something that we need to shift to?
So we can bridge it, and this is what I would think. So there's hard costs and soft costs. So the hard costs are like paint, room structure, flooring. Those stuff you make more timeless. And the soft things that have to be replaced anyway because they're usable items like bedding. Then you could do fun things with the bedding because you're going to have to replace those after 1,000 washes in 5 years anyway. So it's not so the things you have to replace, then you can make those more forward edged so that it's like attractive and build your brand through the soft things without having to rip down the walls or do the painting because those VOCs, even if it's a low VOC paint, it still is. And you got to do coatings because people love to take showers with the doors open and it destroys the paint. So like you don't want to put us in this. You don't want your room to look like it's the '70s. Like I've gone into places and say, "Oh, this tile is terrible. It's like it's the avocado green. This is not going to look good in 2 years." And we can say the same thing for fashion, where yeah, certain things wear out, but it shouldn't be in 6 months. The shirt is so like outdated that I'll never wear it again.
Yeah. And so the soft goods, where does that land? Like, is it just the bedding? Is it the seating? Is it, where can you guys actually maximize that side of things?
So for the textiles, the bedding, but you could also do seat covering. Seat covering is going to have to be replaced anyway because people do wild things in hotels. Yes. But the cheaper seating is thrown away or recycled. I quote unquote recycled 'cause I really don't think it's recycled as much as it should be. But buying the cushioning, because the cushioning is going to wear out anyway. The covering is going to wear out anyway. If you build um, you know, the seating so that those can be replaced when they need to be replaced. The same thing with the sheets after a while. Then you're not having to redo the wood or plastic or whatever the internal structures are, and you're just doing the covering anyway because that has to be replaced. I don't care what kind of microban, 3M, stuff rolls off, and those things could be also hazardous to the environment as how they're produced. Um, it's gonna be gone. Like there's enough naked butts that have sat on those couches in your room that it's done. It's now I've given you a phobia.
Yeah. Well, and so when you start to look at this as an infrastructural thing and a shift that the industry kind of is I think naturally going to make, I think more so is how does life differ, like the user go through a hotel differently than a home? Because I mean, when we talked previously, we talked a lot about energy usage and how that's actually applied. What's the rhythm of somebody who's actually in a hotel versus in a home? Because I think that's one of the more interesting parts. Is most people are going, well, this is just a smaller home, but it's not. It's almost an entirely different type of living.
Yes. So we'll take a day at like everyone gets so like, we'll do a 9 to 5 day at home, and then you do a 9 to 5 day at, so we could parallel that, right? So when you're at home, you get up, 7 o'clock. You run the coffee maker, you get like start making breakfast. So there's an energy spike there. You warm the room. You take showers, so there's energy usage there. So you have that morning routine. At 9 you leave and you're gone for 8 hours. Your building, your domicile can then homeostasis. It's not fighting you by changing the temperature frequently, like opening the doors, closing the doors to leave. You're letting in cooler hot air, and you close the door. So your HVAC system can take a long time to get up to speed. So if it's 30 degrees outside Fahrenheit. It's not burning in Europe. Um, 30 degrees Fahrenheit outside, your home is 75 degrees. You open that door, there's a blast of 30-degree air, and now it sits. And it can slowly go back to homeostasis to the 75 degrees over 8 hours. So it's a different kind of demand. Then you have a lull during the day. Perhaps you may have a partner that has a slightly different schedule, but there's a low. Then you come home. It's colder, so maybe it's below freezing. Move further below freezing. You open the doors. The AC, the heating system has to push it back up, but it does it in a slow way. But you're still getting undressed. Perhaps you take another shower. You cook food. Then you end it at night at 11 p.m. and go to bed. So you have two spikes: beginning of the day, end of the day. When you're in a hotel room, your 9 to 5 life is gone. You are like this multimodal animal that's doing everything. You get up. Also, to the hotels listening, breakfast does not end at like 8 p.m., 8 a.m. I don't know who started this from 6 to 8 so that I can't get my breakfast. I do not want to get up when I'm on vacation at 6 o'clock in the morning to go get food. Can I please get food until like 10 a.m. and then cool, like go to lunch? So you get up, perhaps you go to the gym. So you're opening and closing the door. So you get up, go to the gym, come back. A lot of people don't go to gym, but people do. So you come back, open and close the doors, take a shower, open and close the doors, go to breakfast, open and close the door to come back, perhaps prep yourself for the day, open and close the doors again, then go outside for the day. Then you come back around noon, 1 p.m. People like to settle. Then the AC system has to keep catching up at all of those points. You run the showers. You, as pejorative, run showers far longer in hotels than you ever do at home, and you have to be able to meet that heating demand like instantaneously. When people, the number one complaint you get is that water's not hot enough, and it has not gotten hot enough soon enough. So then that's a cost for your front desk. Now you need another front desk person because they're getting constant calls if your heating system is lagging behind. But you also have this gigantic building, and you've got to be able to get that hot water from the basement all the way up to the top. So do you then install smaller heating systems along the way to keep the heat for that floor? But then that's maintenance. So if that goes down, that whole floor doesn't have it. And then those rooms are unoccupiable. Where if it's in the basement, they're usually more robust and larger because you can do a larger heating system. And if you have a larger tank, you still have some time, but between the time that it's gone down to the actual no more hot water, then you may be able to get the system back up and running versus a smaller instant heater like you get in your like kettle. I forgot what they're called, direct heater systems. Um, so do you do that? Like, it- so then you're jumping this, and then you're having lighting changing, opening the windows, closing the windows. Usually at home, everyone leaves their shades in a very distinct place, and then maybe they change it once per day. But no, you're coming back in, maybe you're getting ready, now you want to open the windows. But if you're facing another window, you're going to close them because you don't want nobody to see your naked body. So then you open them again, and then but that also allows heating and cooling to enter the room. Maybe direct sunlight, you want that feel of the direct sunlight. But if it's in the summer, you're adding too much heat. Heavy drapes also help keep the heat in the room. So if it's a very cold day and you have single pane glass, because the developer of this hotel was just flipping hotels and just getting hotels built as quickly as possible. Um, uh, Developer friends are going to kill me when I get off this, but then you're allowing coolness to radiate back into the room. So this cycle of like duty on the heating, cooling, electricity, the energies is much higher, much more frequent in also a much smaller space. So yeah, you get your lunch, then you come back for dinner, then perhaps you come back in the afternoon. Maybe you want to like freshen up and then go to dinner. You go out again, you go to dinner, and then you come back. Maybe you go out to like a club or something, and you come back late. You'll have 4 to 5 touch points for that person for the space. Where at home they only have 2 touch points, which is morning and evening.
Wow. And so that spike, I mean, obviously it has a huge effect on the infrastructure, huge effect on the water, huge effect on the heating, which all it equates to money. And a lot of it is the part that's unseen by the guest. Realistically, like they have the expectations. Like, for example, I was on the 11th floor. Hot water took a little bit longer. I was like, oh, I'm on the 11th floor. But if I was a guest who was like, oh, didn't heat up within 30 seconds, what is this?
They will immediately call downstairs. And now that's a drain on your resources because now you may need more people. So you, yes, go ahead.
And it's more water usage too at the end of the day too, because you're using more water to actually get it to be warm, and so you're just circulating more and more through the system. Is the solution just a more robust heating and air conditioned HVAC system in the basement, or does it depend on the structure? Like if you were to build a hotel now, like from scratch, what would be the way to build it?
So I would have mini floors, particularly if so they do this a lot with residential buildings where you'll have mechanical floors that are in between floors, quote unquote, in between floors. So if you're doing a very tall building, so if I'm building anything over 11 stories, I would have mechanical floors with the heaters between, and they would take care of certain number of floors. If it's a high end luxury thing, those people complain extremely quickly. So you need more heaters and more robust things. But they could have split you where you stayed. They could have split it. Say like the basement takes care of this. There's a secret floor 13, and everyone skips that number, but it actually is a floor. Put a lot of mechanical things there. Um, Also when it comes to like building sway and like comfort, the taller you get, you're going to need those mechanical floors because you need some of that weight to be distributed in the building appropriately. You don't want everything on the roof because you'll get the tip left and right, and it also damages your water pipes. There's a whole entire the people in 432 Park Avenue can attest to that. So I live in a very tall building. I'm on this, this 60th floor here. Uh, we can't turn we can turn on and off the water. We can set the temperature to what we want, but we cannot turn the flow rate down.
Interesting.
That is because you don't want pipes banging. Because if you're at home and you turn it down and you like about to turn it off and you turn it off, you hear a little bang. So that would be like if you took an entire guitar string that's the length of a building and plucked it. So you got a lot of and so it breaks. It magnifies. There are things that you have to do in taller buildings that you don't have to do in a 5-story home or 2-story home or 1-story home. Um, so I would distribute a lot of things, but also centralize some things. So distribute in the building, but not to individual rooms. Because if something goes wrong, you've taken that off the market. When you have again, if the hot water goes down, you may have a delay between your tank becoming empty and uh, the actual stoppage of hot water. Then you have the ability to right size things. So when we're bringing all that water up from the basement, you're going to have a pump that is powerful. So that creates a bit of vibration in the building. So perhaps having smaller pumps for at those mechanical floors usually is the best way to go when you're going taller. But if I was like, I'm doing an 11-story, 11-story or smaller building, I would centralize everything in the basement.
It's just kind of like when you start to look at buildings, you're like, oh man, how does this actually work? Because a 13th floor. Thought it was always about bad luck. It's probably a mechanical floor. So when you actually start to, I don't know, reinvent the hospitality industry, like you could say like a lot of people are now working from home because of the pandemic, and whether they go back to office or not, I think arguably have more people at home than you used to. Is that affecting the hospitality industry, or is it actually more just about travel? Because I think when you look at the volume of hotels and the volume of Airbnbs and the volume of Verbos, because now you have all these other ones entering the market, is the hospitality industry needing centralization, or is it expanding? Like what's actually happening with the industry in general?
So the work from home thing has been a boon for hospitality because you work from home Monday and Friday. Maybe you could go on a 4-day vacation to someplace close by. So it's been an absolute boon for us. Business travel is down still, but it's been made up by like bleisure. We call it bleisure. I hate the word though. It's like business and leisure. Also, because people are working remotely, perhaps you have once a quarter have all of your employees in the same place to do a town hall. So now you have a bunch of people who then are coming in, but maybe they're visiting and they're like, oh, well, tack on a couple of days because I'll work quote unquote, remotely, even though you're in your head office, and to do fun things. So there's also client trips. So like people are just adding on. When I do a trip, like I visit England quite a bit because they're very impact focused. Um, I'll tack on a couple of days. Maybe I'll go to France. Maybe I'll go to. Last time I went, I think it was the Netherlands. Yes. So I'll add on a couple of that. So it's been a boon, but I can see a cliff. Um, Airbnbs are definitely at a cliff, particularly the laws that are in place. I'm not. I feel Airbnbs give a different experience than most hotels give, and I think there's a space that they should be able to occupy. If I'm traveling with 15 people, we may want to stay all in the same place. We're not renting 15, hotel rooms. Also, people like to have a separation, a place to gather just the group. That's not someone's bedroom. I don't want to look at Uncle Joe's bed, who's over there, like 2 feet away. It's something personal to them. So I think hotels will also adopt a bit of Airbnb, where you get a larger space that has like at least an area that's out of eye shot vision of eye shot is earshot. No, eye shot of a bedroom. I'm making up my own sayings. um, uh, and that's a fantastic thing. So, like, if I go visit my friends and I'm like, "Hey, I'm a nerd, so we play board games." I'm like, "You want to come to my hotel room?" I typically rent a suite because I need that little space. I don't want people playing board games on my bed. Um, so there's always that. So I think Airbnbs have a distinct place, but Airbnbs also compete for regular space as like long-term rentals, as like people's homes. So there's got to be something. It has to be something in between.
Who do you think's doing it right? Like out of the hotel, you could call the hotel chains or the more boutique ones. Who's actually doing it right in terms of where you think the industry is going, not only from like a sustainability and energy usage standpoint, but also like a consumer experience?
I think they've all come now to the point where they demand LED light bulbs. Like there's still hotels that still use like fluorescent, which is terrible in the eyes. It just also creates a very terrible experience, just vision wise. Um, so some have started mandating all LED lighting, and it has to be done now. But this is 20 years late. They're starting to turn the corner. I do enjoy Wyndham, just for the sheer fact that they are very green focused, and they've launched an entire green hotel line. Um, is actually mid market. Sustainability should not be just for the ultra rich. It's fantastic. You guys pay bills, so please stay at my hotel. Um, but it shouldn't just be for the ultra rich. Um, and how do you bring that downstream? So I may end up I'm going to enter the market at the high end because it's going to be a smaller hotel. This is where if I have 40 rooms, that's spending $100 per those rooms, I'm not going to make any money. Um, but then I could then help fund other green initiatives with that money. So you shouldn't also take like rich people doing sustainable things if that money is then being used for research that helps move things downstream. A lot of times it's not.
So Wyndham's doing it well. Um, I've always been curious about Four Seasons.
Four Seasons is opulence. But hold on, so what they give you in non-sustainable like products, they refresh their hotels the least. They go 10
Yeah,
years.
that's
So
what I was wondering. Like, where do they fit in that whole picture? Because I mean, yes, it's you can consider it yes a luxury brand and all that, but their stuff is a little bit more timeless.
yes. So they're less likely to rip out their rooms unless there's damage. A quick repaint or refresh, sure, but they don't have to violently change everything in the room because as long as you can, sand the floors a bit, give it a little buff, they don't need to change it because it's not something that's, fast fashion. The bed frame itself, it's not like, oh, I've there was a very distinct time from like 2010 to in the 2010s where there were canopy beds making their ways back into hotel rooms. They're all gone now. First of all, it's such a liability issue. And I never understood someone's going to climb on that and they're going to break it and they're going to hurt themselves and they're going to sue the F out of you like nobody else's business. I am very risk adverse. The second I went into a hotel with it, I was like, no, this does not make any sense at all. No, not good. So um yeah, so Four Seasons, much slower overturn. So they may be more sustainable than a sustainable brand that's using things that are quick waste. So like you have to balance compostable versus second life. So even like a desk, I will take a desk for like we'll take a desk as an example for a hotel. That should be something that lasts a long time. But hotels also don't want to have to deal with it at the end of it. But we're going to put our capitalist hat back on. How about that's a capturable moment? You're going to capture a revenue stream. So you're ready to redo everything. This table is, this desk is gone. You don't need it. But if you built it in a way that it could be refreshed, how many people go antiquing? Someone else can come in and buy that. Now you've brought a whole bunch of people who normally would not have been on your hotel property to the hotel and introduce them to how awesome this is. They're going to re-engage in another 5 years when you're going to get rid of that the next desk. You can also donate it. You can fix it up and give it to schools. Like there's so much you can do downwind that either makes you money, great for PR, or it comes off your taxes because it's a donation to a charity or something. But we don't capture it. Throw it out. It's the easiest because the easiest thing is just to get a bin and chuck it in it. But it takes that forethought, and I think we're coming around on that in hospitality, but we're still not there.
What's your favorite part of what you do in hospitality? Because I mean, there are so many different areas where you are focused. What's been your favorite part of it?
It's 100% sustainability. The part and impact. Those are the two things that are my thing. If we do good for the people, do good for the planet, they'll repay us, and they'll repay us with, not having storms, being insurable. These are all things that are business expenses. Damage, maintenance, all these things affect our bottom line. You pay your people better, you treat them better, they're going to come back, and they'll spend money on property. Like the worst thing during my young 20s, I'm a very much into electronics. The worst thing was like working at Best Buy and getting that discount. Like my money went directly back into Best Buy, and I'm like, I'm just working here for like a PS3,
Yeah.
So it is. But you can then recapture that money and then use it for good things, and doing it in an ethical manner. One of the things that gets my goat as a consumer are resort fees. I hate them. Put them on the price. Stop hiding them. This is the one of the most unethical way of like getting more money out of me. It's like you're taking a plane and it's like, oh, there's a carry a bag on to the plane fee. Like, no, we could do this in a good way. We could be good to people and like still make money. Like you can do both. You don't have to be opposed. You don't have to treat the world like trash. You don't need to treat your employees like trash. You don't need to treat your community like trash to make money.
So is it more about the transparency around it? Because I think there is a lot of like, why resort fee? Why are there all these fees? So I'll stay at an Airbnb, and yeah, they have a cleaning fee, but at least it's a cleaning fee. Like, where
But
is
then they
that?
make you do all your own chores.
Exactly,
So there's
exactly. So
that.
so where's that line of transparency for hotels? Because obviously they do have to make money, but do you think that it would be reasonable if they're like, hey, here's what we're trying to achieve as a company. We're trying to do these updates. Here's how we actually operate. Because I mean, I didn't understand how hotels operate, like a 3 to 5 year refresh, or a 5 to 10 being a different category. Like, I literally would have never thought that. And if that's like planned in the business model and accepted for people to enjoy their time, I think that people would be a little bit more okay with, oh, I'm going to spend, 150 on this room rather than 130, or, whatever that is. Is that part of the transition? Is it just the transparency?
There has to be transparency, how this is saved. Again, we have to transition to additive sustainability, not subtractive. So they're like, you go into the room, they're like, we won't wash your towels. That's subtracting from my life. That is, I'm very weird around like used towels. um, so how can we do that sustainably and still give people what they want? It also comes to the point where sustainability is like a luxury when it's a necessity, and we have to break that apart. So your people expect, because it's sustainable, you should pay more. Yeah, to help you get off the ground, perhaps I am willing to buy the seaweed, sweater, because this is the beginning, and you're like getting your business model together, and getting your supply chain. But after a while, it should be price parity. But it doesn't seem that sustainability is becoming price parity. They're like, no, it's luxury, so it's more. You deserve sustainability because you make more money. No, you deserve sustainability because I don't want wildfires turning the sky orange again.
I think that's such a huge part of it, because I mean, when you look at the access to sustainability, it very much is a luxury thing. It's like, even if you look at the food side, organic is more expensive. If you don't have the opportunity to actually buy the better thing, you're not going to buy the better thing. And I think that when you look at even the EV industry, for example, you take away the government subsidies and you figure out if the business can actually stand on its own. It's hard. It's actually a difficult industry to stand on its own without the subsidies and the tax credits and all the things, because it's still a luxury product at the end of the day. People can't afford that vehicle versus another vehicle that might be on the used market that's a tenth of the price, that if they put a little bit of maintenance in, it's going to run for another 100,000 miles. Like, my first cars easily ran over 200,000 miles and still went strong. And it's like, why would you replace something that works? And I think that part of that conversation around sustainability needs to be accessibility. Like, it's a huge issue that people actually don't have access to sustainable options. It's more just luxury.
Yes. So fixing that, I 100% agree. Like, fixing that and taking sustainability away from the like luxury is, yes, something can be more luxurious. I have no problem with luxury, but you also need sustainability is for everyone. So um, that is why I say it has to be more profitable than not profitable, because then I don't need to upcharge you as a guest to experience this. I already have it worked in my model, and I don't need to do that. Um, it's also there's also class warfare effectively, where now that if you attach sustainability to luxury, then it's like eat the rich. I understand, like everybody should be paying their share fair, and being a good person to the people and the planet. But then it becomes like, even if I could afford it, I won't. And people dig down in this weird, like, cut the nose off to spite the face kind of mentality. Um, that has to go. Like, sustainability for everybody, impact for everybody. Everybody should be able to live. I'm very happy that in New York we had just passed the law where delivery people get like a living wage. Very happy. I'll still tip, but my God, like delivering for DoorDash and in freezing weather and snow, like that is something I don't want to do. The whole reason I'm ordering is because I don't want to go outside. So they should be paid well. Paying the people well, treating the people well, it comes back to us in spades. You never know who the next inventor is going to be, who then can then invent something that's more sustainable, or not just inventor, also like refiner. Like it took a long time for solar panels to get as um, refined as they are, as power, power versus weight per kilowatt. We could go further than that. But if they're mired down and not able to pursue those things, they can't. And because they can't, then we're stuck. Then we get in the cycle of like, well, we can't do anything about it. Let's burn some more oil. Like, no, like expand beyond.
Mm. Well, and I also think a lot of the best inventions come out of a kind of a sense of restriction in a way. It's almost that problem of, well, I only have these two things, so I'm going to try and solve it with these two things. And it turns out that solution's actually way better than if you had all the assets in the world to be able to solve it. And I think that when you give access to innovation, when you give access to sustainability, when you give access to all the different options, that's when actually the really, really cool stuff gets invented. I mean, you look at almost some of the biggest inventions of our time, they were very much out of people who didn't have access to a lot. And they went, yeah, let's just make this work. And suddenly that's the solution that everybody wants to use.
Yeah, I haven't thought of it like that, but yes, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking a lot about because I think that maybe this is more of a startup story, but like, startups, you can be a well-funded startup, but even a well-funded startup actually doesn't have a lot of capital. Like the investors very much say, hey, here's your capital to get there and get there. And it's oftentimes in those moments where you're squeezed really, really hard, that's when actually the business model gets better. It gets way more efficient. And that's where I think if we apply that mindset as a society and we support that and we celebrate that in a way where we're like, hey, let's elevate these inventions, you're actually able to get somewhere. I think that sometimes there's a value in having the top down mindset, the luxury down, but I also believe there's a bottom up mindset as well.
I agree. I think that is a holistic scheme. So some stuff can start at the top, some stuff can start at the bottom, and some stuff start at the middle. Be an efficient system of being able to innovate and inspire.
I mean, how did you come up with your system? I mean, what kind of ideated that? I mean, you went from art to now suddenly you're doing heating and pretty much building management for the hospitality industry in terms of their sustainability footprint. Like what was that invention? What made you want to do that?
This had been rattling in my mind since I was in my early 20s. Like that's ages ago. Um, but I had no access to like engineers or patent lawyers or all these other people until I had run the art company and gotten, like made some money and I was able to devote some money and some time into making this happen. Um, it's I'm really good at finding inefficiencies and as a system. So we're very good at focusing on point efficiency so that solar panels 99% efficient, but if it's wasting 100% of the heat energy that hit the roof, you just wasted 100% of the heat energy and you can do something with that. So why not do something with it? Um, you know, it, it's and we have to break ourselves of point efficiency and start looking at system efficiency as well because if you can take something that's wasted and then continue it down the system, that's far better than if you were like 99% efficient and then wasting 100% of something that's not efficient. So now you're down to 50% efficiency effectively. It's also based on your needs. Like, do you need more heating than electricity? Or if you had the heating, do you need as much electricity? Because now you're not using heat pumps and anything else. And you can do that, that's made naturally. Like, it's everything's a floating mosaic. And I can sometimes float the mosaic into place. And I'm like, oh, this makes sense. And other times, everything's just a wild mess. And if you haven't noticed from the way I speak very circular and mosaic, and I come back to pieces. So it's kind of just something that's in my mind. I know I think mildly different. So when people take notes and when I take notes, my notes are completely different. They're more about impressions and like projections than what was actually said. So I have a different way of thinking, and it might just be like neurologically, may just be a weird quirk of my biology.
And so when you decided to shift from art to building efficiency, what was that decision where you're like, I'm going to go this direction? Like, was it just something that was there, but like you have that almost, jump off the cliff moment?
Yeah, it was a jump off the cliff. So I think anything around the pandemic was like a lot of people's like moment where like, we're going to shift, we're going to do something different. It could be a gigantic recession, like the Great Recession. A lot of the large businesses that are in business are formed because of the Great Depression. That was my moment. And I went through all that stuff with the carbon credit stuff. And I looked at my face. I'm like, if I'm going to be sustainable, I need to be actually the one who does it. I need to like make sure that it actually has an effect, not just a piece of paper for a tree that might be growing, but also could be dead in 2 days. Um, so that was my moment. If I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it absolutely completely. Am I allowed to curse?
Yeah, totally.
Oh, good, 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 good. Okay. So my grandmother used to say, if you're gonna be the bitch, be the whole bitch. So that is kind of like we're a very feisty family. So um if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it all the way. Don't half-ass it. If you're going to do it, do it. I understand. Even if you don't make it all the way and you gave it the best shot, maybe something did happen. Maybe if I don't make it all the way, I inspire the next person to push themselves to make it all the way. Um, Again, you can always go back to sustainability. Day one, those solar panels were not going good. Day one, that car engine, that battery was not good. Like it takes iterations, and sometimes the iteration doesn't come from the same person. It comes from another group of people, or it comes from another generation because things advance. Also, materials advance. The same materials are not the same materials they're using 1,000 years ago. One of the most expensive metals on Earth wasn't gold or wasn't platinum. It was aluminum because we couldn't figure out how to mine it appropriately. And then we did, and now is aluminum foil. It's like the cheapest thing ever. But if you talk to somebody in the 20s, it was like magic to them. So you also have to take into account like time wise, like, hey, I may be doing something that I can't complete, but I'll at least take it 80% of the way. But because we're a very money driven and money focused society, that drive isn't there for a lot of people because they're like, hey, I can't feed my children. I can't feed myself. So they don't go down that road and don't become inventors and don't do at least step one out of step 100 or step five out of step, 1,000.
And so where are you at percentage wise, do you think?
I took it from like out of step 100, I took it to step 50, and then I've given it to the engineers who they're going to complete the rest of it. I I can't machine things, I can't do those things, but I can say, hey, this doesn't look right. Let's help fix this together. So I've enlisted universities to help. I've enlisted education. So also, when it comes to sustainability numbers, we'll loop back on that. Listen to scientists. Scientists aren't selling you something; they are doing their jobs. If they're telling you that something is not good, they're not paid by like big pharma. Like they're doing independent research, and if they are paid by big pharma, don't ever listen to them. Um, but there's also part of science is peer review. Like if you do something, you're a scientist, you do something, I should be able to test it by going down your scientific research paper, and if I get a different result, you're a liar. And that is exactly how science is. It's not about belief, it's about understanding. It's about learning. It's not about I believe this. That word doesn't belong in science. It is I understand this. And there's tons of things I don't understand about science. Um, but at least say like the learned people that have knowledge that I don't have or understanding that I don't have do understand this. So I should believe in them. So there's also like, you know, um, that we always don't always have to be right either. But that shoots off into a whole like psychological conversation.
Well, and what was that transition like for you going from I don't know, more of an artist background to more of an engineering, almost a it's yes or a no kind of situation. I mean, there is gray in the invention process, obviously, in the innovation process, but generally you get the yielded result and the desired result, or you don't, and then you work to innovate on it. What was that transition like for you, going from more honestly as an artist background? I mean, I've been a filmmaker almost my entire life, and you live in this gray area of literally being like, well, anything could be anything, and then you suddenly go into this super hyper engineering side of things. What was that like for you?
There was a lot of disbelief, particularly from like older engineers. And because some people do get set in their ways. So people are going to tell you, no, you're stupid for doing this. So the first objection is like, just use solar panels. It's fine. I'm like, if that attitude was taken when solar panels were coming out, you would just say, burn some fuel. Why are you doing that? Like electricity is abundant. At some point, development is part of the process. So I also want to break that mold. And I had to break that mold of a lot of people, and particularly around engineers. That I'm like, hey, this is a discovery. If this works out right, fantastic. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But at least we tried, and perhaps we set down some research for someone else who can come along and pick it up afterwards. And that's a very non-capitalist way of looking at that because everyone wants an ROI. But luckily, it did pan out. um, and but that's again just recapturing, you know, waste and putting it to use. Nothing's waste. Everything goes somewhere, and so effectively, I like the word circularity, but it means nothing, and we have to actually say like zero waste, as close to a zero waste system as possible. Give it some meaning to the other people that are not as things. So it's going to engineering was kind of like painting painting like but of like a landscape because there's a lot of little things that are moving around and have a very zoomed out view where a lot of engineers are very point focused and they're very like I do system exchanges and I'm like okay that's a part of this we do have to have like energy exchange they're kinetic engineers but hey we need some mechanical things here and you have to get a whole nother kind of engineer who comes in and it's like I do mechanical but I don't do thermodynamics and then I'm like okay we got to get a whole nother engineer but being able to orchestrate that and put them all together is a talent in and of itself. And I will never say like, hey, um, that's not a talent because getting people to cooperate is even if you pay them, it's still it's still a thing. And then you still have to do the, people management because people do occasionally need to be managed, and there's always butting heads. Particularly, engineers always butt heads, and I love it. And it's very, but it is also wild as hell. And in the background, they're always doing random things. You always have that one person in the group who's doing something that you had no business doing, and I'm like, come back here. Wayward child, you're out in the fields and you're supposed to be like in the yard. You're like, but nope, he's running down the street talking about like a whole different technology. It's like, what about AI? I'm like, we're not there yet. Let's pull ourselves back.
And when you start to see the vision come to life, I mean, what was it like to start to communicate it? Because I think that's one of the big key components is most any invention, new innovation, specifically as it comes to sustainability, is actually adoption. It's getting people to be like, yeah, I get this. What was that like in terms of the adoption side of things? Because I think that's like one of the hardest ones.
I needed a translator. So the way I speak is a very particular way in the way I form my thoughts. And I need someone who's more technical, but also kind of like a PR for me to be able to explain this is why. So the way I speak now has been formed partly because of my very good engineer advisor, Victor Roeder, has been like, hey, they don't understand that. How do we get them to say this? He spent, 20 years at GM and GE, like as a engineer. Like, how do you explain this to someone who's not technical? And that is why I also don't use a lot of technical terms when I'm doing interviews. Like if I say an acronym, I immediately say like this is what it means. Not everybody's versed. Also, it's like alphabet soup at some point, and everyone's just yelling out like random things. I understand some people use it because it's a way of shortening, but also some people use it because it makes them feel like they're smarter than. You're not here to feel better than somebody. You're here to get people to be adopted. Like using overly complex terminologies ends up just losing your base because your base isn't the people that understand because they already understand. That's speaking to the choir. You've got to speak to the masses. Um, so like sustainability has a huge problem with this. Like using additionality. Additionality doesn't mean anything. It's a made up word. You just, like I understand it's a very easy way of like saying like, oh, you could do this and that. But to a lame person, if I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm sustainable with impact additionality, I don't know what that means. But it's technically it's true, and of course it's in some of our wording. But I also immediately explain what additionality is. Being able to do good things for the people and the planet and the people. Um, Terminology it really does matter, and also like people may just not use those terms anyway, even if they're professors. Like they just PR is needed, and I guess it's a team effort to move from something highly technical to something that everyone can understand. But you don't need to dumb it down, but just add in those clips that people can learn. So if you do again use those ADR or like average daily rate for rooms, like just throw that in once, and while somebody's listening, they'll say, "Oh, that's what that means," and I know from now on. There've been plenty of times I've talked to my patent lawyer and he said something. I'm like, explain to me like I'm a kindergartner because you are doing. He's like, something allowance. I'm like, who's allowed here? I don't know what allowance means. What context is this? Please explain to me.
Do you think that it's a level of curiosity that I think the consumer would have to have? Or is it because I think there's a certain level of the adoption rate of sustainability? I think you have two sides of it. You have one that is well, I just don't want to think about it. Like I want to pull the thing off the shelf and just know that I'm making the right choice. Whether it has the green leaf or not, I want to know that it actually has, the impact that I'm looking for. You have that side. And then you have the other side that's like, I want to know everything about it. I need to know all of it. I think those are the two different types of consumers when you come to sustainability or even an adoption of a new technology. Where do you think it is? Do you think it's more on the side of like the seamless or the side that people want to know and are more curious and need to know in order to make a better decision?
So the people who are curious and need to know are a small fraction of a general public. So how do you bridge that gap? Is by benefits. People don't care about all. General public does not care about all those things. They want to know: is this sweater that's made from algae or this sweater that's made from kelp seaweed? Does it keep me warm? Does it last? Does it look good? Sustainability has to kind of come down off his high horse and say, I'm a benefit to you in a tangible way that you can see from the moment that you buy this product or use this service. But yes, there's background things. You're saving the planet, like like you're not having like the sea rise and your city's not gone. Have potable water, but those things are 20 years down the line. You'll see the effects 20 years down the line. You won't, but they need that effect, the immediate effect, because that's the transaction. You're giving the money and you're getting something. If you can't say to the general public, you're getting something better than what you had before, equal or better than what you had before for the same price, they're going to turn off. So it doesn't matter how much proselytizing you can do. The general public is a different kind of animal than I call them like, apostles effectively. The people who follow you who are like, yes, I'm into sustainability. This is awesome. Those people are fantastic. You can talk to them as much as you want. They believe everything and they'll do the research and actually love it. But what about the other 80% of the people who are like, I'm just trying to live my life. I want to do something nice for the planet, but I do not feel like I need to go and like get an encyclopedia or like constantly on like Google, like going up and down and like searching things. So like, there are people who are like, working 80 hours a week, 60 hours a week, feeding their family and kids. They may want to be the people who are interested. They just don't have the time.
So how do you make that transition? I guess like how do you communicate to that consumer? Because I mean, that is how do they discern it? Like I often say that we're starting to get to the age of discernment. We have so much information that now we have to know how to discern what is good, what is bad, what is truth, what is not. How do you do that?
For myself, I'll take hotels as an example. I can be super sustainable. I produce 1 megawatt worth of power for the community sustainably, heating and cooling for the community as district heating and district cooling. I don't charge $1 more for that hotel than a competing hotel that's down the street. And in fact, I could lower the price of that hotel and still make the same amount as the people down the street. That's the what they care about. They care about the service, they care about the benefit to them. Some may say, "Hey, I'll pay more to stay in a hotel that's sustainable," but that's your 20%. That's your acolytes. That's your apostles. Those are people who would really believe it. The 80% are now left out. So providing the things at the same price, that's what we have to do. I'm like, I'll like that's the hill I'll die on. Give everyone the access to sustainability. I understand at first it costs more because you've got to do research and get things cheaper and your supply chain and all these things that do drive the price up. But at some point, the price has to go down.
So as a company, is it more thinking longevity too? Because I think oftentimes it's like right now, you can make a business based around sustainability, jack the price up, hit that 20% that can do it, and literally make a killing and probably retire within 5 years. Like that's realistically what people can do and what some are doing. But the businesses that actually last for generations, the ones that we remember, the ones that just are always there, they're always thinking what's going to be the thing in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Where do we want to be? Is it a mindset shift of just like, okay, we got to go through a little bit of pain, a little bit of hurt, but then we're going to get to a good place rather than just let's try and cash in on this and move on and go back to the way things were?
So the first example I would call carbon credits. So like it's idea wise, it makes a lot of sense. Like, hey, I should be able to like plant some trees, everything will be fantastic. But then it damages the people who are doing the 20 and 30-year thing because people are saying like, hey, it's been 10 years of this carbon credit stuff, and scientists are still telling us that the temperature's going up. Sustainability doesn't work. No, like that doesn't work. So it in there for the quick buck hurts the long term. Even sometimes for businesses where you have investors who are like, what happened this quarter? Maybe you just need to get over this quarter and next year it'll be better. But no, they're focused on quarter, Q2 2024. We got to be worried about whether we could make it to the Q5, Q4. Um, so it's a balance. Like, again, if you're more profitable by being sustainable and impactful, then you don't have to worry about cashing out in 5 years. You've got that money anyway. Then you can then plan for the 20, the 30, the 40 years. I don't mind, again, if you start high in the luxury market, you make that bunch of money, and then you take some of those proceeds and then continue to refine your sustainability things and then spread it out to the general public. Trickle down economics doesn't work, and I understand. In theory, it works, but it doesn't. But at some point, you're at that high end market, you run out of customers. So as a business, you're going to be forced to do those things anyway. Why not just plan that into the plan anyway? At some point, Louis, Gucci, they had to go slightly lower end because there's only so many people who are going to spend $20,000 on a handbag. So now they've got lower things. Coach is another famous one, super expensive, but now they've got less expensive things because that market is saturated. You've got to find another market. So just plan. I just would like if companies start at luxury, they plan that into their business, their business model that they will, farm it out. Like, yeah, Tesla started out with like 100 and $200,000 cars, but at least some of them are now 40, and then they're talking about going down to 25 or 30. So it's happening much slower than I would like, but um, it's there. So I think that's the ultimate goal, and that's how I would handle that.
You see the future of sustainability actually going? Whether it's the hospitality industry or not, where do you see the entire market going?
So it has to be a holistic approach. So I'll take New York City, for example, large cities. We are tons of concrete, tons of glass. We have a heat island effect. Um, Concrete during the day or when it's hot, it absorbs the heat and then kicks it back into the apartments. Heat pumps pump that heat back outside. At some point, when we're over 85% saturation in a large city of heat pumps stop working or being particularly effective because you're just bailing out the ship with a cup when it's overrunning. So you're kicking the heat back outside. The heat is then absorbed by the concrete and then kicked back inside. So then you get hotter nights. And then the thing is kicking things outside at night. It's still hot. And then it's coming back in the daytime. So at some point, you have to start greening those cities. So it's not a one explicit way that's going to move us forward with sustainability. It has to be a holistic approach. So yeah, heat pumps, absolutely use them. Please don't use resistive heaters because they use a lot of electricity. Um, so then you have to worry about what's your water usage, the lower water use things. I always thought, just ranted tangentially, like, why do we use fresh water for toilets? Why don't we use salt water? Like, yeah, or gray water. Like, that's water. Water is becoming more and more scarce. Not through our own usage, and also because of climate change and our things like saltwater pools are amazing, and they also retain their water. So if you're in a very hot climate, it should be saltwater. Saltwater helps hold the
Also better for the skin compared to chlorine.
yes, and you're not also using dangerous chemicals, and that's also like then how the chlorine is mined or manufactured, and there's so much to knock on effects. So like small changes, I think, is the way we need to go versus drastic changes. Saying like you can't drive a car anymore. There are plenty of opportunities that you do need to drive a car. But perhaps driving a car that's sustainable. Maybe you don't need to drive the car all the time, and you can just sit and like do things. Like I do own a car, and I'm in New York City, but I do a lot of site visits outside of New York City. So the transportation in the Northeast is fine as long as you're in a major city. Absolutely, going to Boston, I'll gladly jump on Amtrak. You know, if I'm going to Allentown, it's a 4-hour train ride or it's a 2-hour drive, and I have to be there now. Like I gotta go. Um, how we produce electricity for electric cars, how those batteries are produced, using a battery that's not, cobalt, driven, perhaps, so the refinement has to happen or, better, water treatment plants. Cause there are like, you can use desalination for fresh water that uses a lot of electricity. They use a lot of resources. Um, you know, Switching to food waste and agriculture. I'm glad we're able to get to this. Um, Agriculture is huge food waste. So we'll take, for example, meat versus vegetables. So you take a lettuce. This is the amount of food spoilage on vegetables are very high. So every time that joke, everyone says like, "Oh, I got that bag of salad and then like I threw it out because it went gross." First of all, the second you chop something, it's gonna increase the decay, the molding rate. Like what's the word for that? Decay? Yeah, I think it's decay rate. Yes, it's gonna go bad quicker. But if I have a bad piece of meat that's gonna go bad, throw it in the freezer before it does, like right in the freezer, like that piece of chicken in the freezer. Um, so you have a lot of waste in agriculture, also just because it doesn't look good, it doesn't look pretty. That lettuce is weird shaped. No one's gonna buy it. It goes in the garbage. Where if it's an animal based product, it may become ground meat, or may become dog food, or may become cat food. Like there's a, there's a way of recapturing those things. As you're going forward. So for myself, and this is something that I want to do, building into the hotel model, is a dynamic agriculture system, so that um, the things that we use the most at the hotel is the things that we grow on property, and the things that are higher cost. So um, and they're also not locally found. So, for instance, this hotel is fantastic. You know, we have a lot of tomato-based dishes and a lot of saffron-based dishes. I like saffron because saffron's expensive. Um, if there's a tomato farm down the road or like in the same city or location, don't grow tomatoes. It's right there. Like, why would you? But if the saffron is coming from on the other side of the planet, that's the thing that you should grow. It's also high cost. Anything that you're wasting, you should grow yourself. So I say this for like, yeah, this is the thing. Like lettuce is for me. It's like I don't have salads every day, but I want to have a salad, and the lettuce is weird. Take a little pot and grow some lettuce, and then take the lettuce off individually as you need it. And if you don't need it, the plant is still growing. It isn't garbage. You're not just wasted all that water, all the fertilizer that goes into it, all the land space that you waste if you just throw something out. Um, Also, composting is fantastic. I live in a city. I'm not going to compost in my apartment. I do not need. I don't care. I've already had one, and they're like, "Oh, it's orderless." It is not. It is not. They're absolutely lied. They lied to me, and so you can do what you can with the space that you have. So maximizing that, using companion plants, particularly like I have asparagus and tomatoes growing together. Those are fantastic together. You'll get asparagus. Asparagus will grow up to 15 years. So they're perennial. Like they'll just keep coming up. Don't cut down all the shoots at once. So asparagus, you get them when they're small, but if you do, you'll kill it because it has no way of like creating energy. So you got to let some of them grow. I've done my mistakes. Um, but the tomatoes, like do something to the soil and aerate the soil in a way that asparagus absolutely loves it. So they're both like, going near each other. You can, plant sage near other plants because they're also natural deterrents for pests. So now you're not using as many pesticides. Um, like there's so much that we can do that is affecting our waste in agriculture that it directly affects hospitality because you go to a place you want to eat food or you're going there and like eating like bags of nuts. No, you go to the restaurants, you're eating nearby. Like, it goes into that breakfast that is only from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. So it's such a way. Like I said, I'm really good at seeing system efficiency inefficiencies and actually seeing how to like capture it. And I don't know where that comes from. I think I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I have tons of siblings. So everything we had to use. You know, those scraps of vegetables that can become vegetable stock. I love to cook too, so there's also it's a thing. So I'll invite everybody over. Don't come to my house. I'm just joking. Oh, you can, but not the
60th
viewers.
floor.
Exactly. Everyone will be here. So like I'm looking out and I'm like looking at the plants that I have, and I'm like, every single one of the plants that are in my apartment, I like use. There's pepper plant. I love spicy things, so I hope you're spice ready. So like I also make my own hot sauce. Dabbling in the algae stuff, growing algae. I made it into beer. It kind of tastes like kombucha, so I'm sorry for that. So if algae beer becomes a thing, it was my fault. Um, but it's also highly water conservative. So if you're taking algae, you're saving about 90 something, 93% over if you over normal agriculture because it's a closed system. The water isn't going anywhere. Of course, it uses a bit of water to grow itself, to fill the cell. You strain the water off, you can clean that water and then reuse it again. You're not losing water to evaporation. Evaporation is actually how non-woody plants have to work. That's why you have to spray the leaves because it evaporates and then pulls the water from the roots up. Um, so it needs that. Some of the water just evaporates, some of it's runoff, some of it goes in the ground. It's never touched by the plant. So you have a lot of these inefficiencies. How can you do something and make it more efficient in places that also may not be able to grow? You can grow algae in a tank. You can do a loop that goes outside of a building and comes back. You can also count as a green roof and help absorb heat and keep heat off of the building. Uh, I have tons of ideas, and I'm always the first person to try it out on. I'm just like, well, we're gonna see how this works. I have multiple batches of beer algae in my house, like just like sitting in the fridge, and I taste them. I'm like, oh, that one's gross. It's a very earthy, fishy kind of taste, and I gotta like knock that out.
But I mean, I think there's so much value in the experimentation. Like it's figuring out what works, what doesn't work. I think we get so set on, one solution, one thing, and then that's it. But like there's a way to solve any problem multiple different ways. Like there's no reason to get set on one. And I love that your approach is like let's just try it. See if it works. If it doesn't, cool. Well, we'll try and adjust it. And if not, well, we got pretty far down the road anyway. And probably discovered some things along the way. Like I love that you're always experimenting. Like is that something you've always done?
Yeah, very science focused, very like curious about the world. I was the kid that would like cut his toys in half to see what's inside. I had one of those stretchy arm people.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I cut them in half, and my mother was like, "Why did you do that?" I was like, "What's inside of it?" So I was the person who would like take apart an alarm clock to see like what's inside. Like I've always had that natural curiosity, and I feel that a lot of people have that, but they've kind of like killed it off in themselves because they're so like focused in their 9 to 5 or like grinding. Like this is also why I love impact because give people that ability, that time to think, and maybe something magical will happen, something out. We're also we're very used to absolutes, and science is not an absolute. There's always room for discoveries. In fact, theory of relativity is about like nothing's absolute. If you put enough energy into something, something wild might happen. So like matter can't be created or destroyed. It kind of can if you blow up a sun, or you have a big bang. You just took energy and made so like uh, you know, um, you know. So it's something that I want to inspire in people. And that's also a huge part of his education. So our first hotel property will have a STEM lab, and this could be a place where we'll be able to demonstrate our technologies, but also bring down students, get the kids involved. Not just kids, it could also be grown adults, like have them be a part of that process. Have them rejoin the joy of learning. Sometimes that joy of learning gets beat out of you when you've sat in college and you're like, I'm never doing this again. Reignite that like magic. They're like, oh, this is like amazing. Show the people the process. I know we're very like patented this, patented that, but once it's patented, you can start showing people, and if they copy, you can just sue them. Um, but show people how to do things, train the people how to do that. So like there's a project in Puerto Rico we're doing, but most of it is about education, being able to like create these mechanical and electrical engineers so that they can take care of their own island, that they don't have to ship in all these mechanical and electrical engineers every time a storm hits and their wires go down. Like, teaching people to do things for themselves. They'll create something like fantastic. And if it's so fantastic, maybe I'll come back and buy it, or I'll help invest and move along. That's why I said, if you guys have a invention or something, and particularly around textiles, like I love textiles is such a way that can become so much more like sustainable and impactful. Let's do it. Like, I want to talk to the algae people. I want to talk to the thing because if you can get the press and perhaps put it in the hotel property, you just created an entire industry that did not exist in that place that then can, like I'll spin that off and it'll become a public benefits corporation. I don't need to constantly build my own, textile, but perhaps turn that over to the people gives them something that they never had before, and it's doing it in a good way.
Mm. I love your perspective around it too, because it's about humanity. It's about helping people. And I love that process of learning and curiosity. Like that's one thing that I feel it's been huge, a part of GOAT, and one of the greatest joys of me doing this in my life is that being able to use a camera and media as a tool for learning, and to be able to translate that to other people. I think that's one of the biggest things that we try and do at GOAT. It's pretty much like itch that curiosity, and for me to be able to experience that with a lot of these, I mean, just world changing innovations, and you're going, how does that work? Let's cut it open and see it. It's incredible. I mean, and when I can get my hands on it, I get it. And when you can start to inspire that with other people and go, hey, try that yourself, that's when things start actually moving. And I think that, yeah, curiosity is one of the biggest things I think we can apply. And also just this willingness to be wrong, but also the willingness to persist and learn.
I'd absolutely be wrong. Be teachable. You're not always going to be right, or something you learned before may just apply in this situation. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. Like being wrong has like been equated with me being bad. Like being wrong is I've just been taught something otherwise. Like I for years ago, like someone told me something. I guess it was about the universe contracting versus expanding, and then I said it to like a scientist. He was like, "Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Who told you that? It was a lie." But I was like, "Oh my god, I'm a terrible person. I feel bad." I'm like, "Oh, I just learned something." So approach things with that learning mentality. I think that would help us as a society, as a whole. It'll depolarize a lot of nonsense, and bring us together and actually like focus us on moving forward. I feel like we're very stuck. I'm still having to talk to people about like the earth is flat or not. Um, and I'm just like, no. So, but I had a family friend who was this, and I just did it with a plate. They're like, if the earth is the plate, turn the lights off, turn on your phone's flashlight. How can you create a 24-hour day if the light is always on the same side of the planet? You can't. You could do a 12-hour day, but at some point, once the light moves past the edge of the plate, it's all dark at once. But it's not their fault. It's just education in this country has taken a wild turn.
It's being open. I mean, I think it's being open to the possibility of anything, and I think that we're not taught to be open to any of our thought preconceived notions to be actually totally flipped on its head. Um, and that's the joy of it.
Yeah, I call it absolutism. Everything has to be an absolute. That's not the way the world works. There's a lot of gray. As you said, we experience a lot of things, and there's some things that are this and that. There's a lot of gray in between. There's a lot of shades and a lot of shades that people can't see because they're colorblind. But not because they're colorblind, meaning they actually can't see color, but because they have not experienced, or their minds and their mentality isn't to accept those other things that are between. And I think sustainability, again, like, I draw back to the example of like telling people they're bad because they do this. That is not gonna do things, but that seems the way like everyone talks about sustainability. It's like, how dare you, but you don't like, there's shades of gray in between. Like everybody, like, I piss people off, animal people off a lot with this, but dogs are highly wasteful. They're highly impactful to our environment, and they're like having three people. The carbon footprint is usually about the size of three people, because they exclusively eat meat. They use a lot of plastics in their poops. When you pick their poop bag up, that's plastic. Um, their poop is highly toxic. But why can't we have dogs? Like, we could figure this out. Like, there's ways of doing things in a good way. Like, I love dogs. Like, but I'm not going to tell people, how dare you have a dog? I'm also not going to tell someone, how dare they have a steak? Let's just figure out how to do things in a way that is sustainable for everybody.
And where's your favorite place just on the planet to enjoy nature?
Oh, it was Hawaii. I also like, I went to the top of a volcano and like saw like nothing but water around the island, and I was like, it like everything connected in the right place. It was also a very teachable moment. I did not know well into my 20s that pineapples did not grow on trees. They're from bushes. I didn't know that. I was like, what? And then like also like the universe expanded. I saw everything all at once. I was like, oh no. I like completely blew my mind. It's like a strawberry kind of bush. And I was like, oh no. I thought the green part on the top was like what attached to the tree and it was like hanging down like mangoes or something. But no, it's out of the ground. I was like, oh, I did feel stupid, but I accepted it. I laugh about it. But that's how you have to take learning. Like, yeah, sometimes you're like, oh, that is not what I thought at all. So I definitely love Hawaii for the nature. I like Japan because of their balance between being like hyper like civilized, and then you could just walk outside of Tokyo and like there's like nothing but forest. I like the kind of like balance between like nature and like human nature. And we do need cities to live in. We don't have to be spread out, but also some people may want to be spread out. Like, how do we do that in a way that like doesn't destroy everything? And I kind of like the way Japanese have like balanced the both of being like hyper like tech focused, but also humanized as well. There's still somebody there to help me with my like card, and this is what the New Yorker, the moving back to the story about the New Yorker thing. I thought this man was trying to scam me. I was in the train station. I was absolutely lost. It was like Shibuya like train station. I was completely lost. And like I was trying to follow the numbers. I was like going in circles. Like at some point I was just standing certain like still going and like spinning in a circle. I must have looked so insane. Someone out of the crowd was like, "Hey, do you need help?" My New Yorker me is like, "You're selling me something. Someone help!" Like, and me like, "No, go away, go away." And the lady was like, "Do you want a ticket too?" Because I was trying to figure out the machine. I was like looking at the maps. I was like, she's like, "Oh, I have a free ticket." Immediately thought scam. Immediately thought scam. So like, my face was like, I just must have made a face at her, and she's like, "No, no, no. Like, I don't need this anymore. I'm like, I don't live in Tokyo, but I'm like taking this to Shinkansen. I'm leaving, but I have like a metro ticket. You can have it. It'll take you anywhere." And she like gave it to me, and I was like, "Oh, that was really nice," but I thought it was a scam. Um, so like the humanized part of it, where like people are still very involved with each other. Like I thought it's a very nice way, and the way they treat each other. Like you could scam the crap out of Japan, and like you like there's like YouTubers doing that. They're terrible people, but like I like that like cold but also warm like feeling. Like I feel like if I was in trouble, someone in Japan would help me, and they have. Like I had this very old man who just like grabbed me out of a crowd. He's like, "You're lost." He like grabbed me. He's like, "Where are you going?" He's like, "Okay, I'll take you there." And then like he pulled me on the train. This man was like 80 years old. And he's like, okay, while we're here, help me with my English. And like he like asked me what a monopoly was. Like we went down like a whole entire list. It just, let's take that about like, let's apply that to learning. Let's bring that back to the US. Like I remember a time where we were very warm and very nice, but also a time where racism was bad. So like let's build, and you could take that and move to sustainability. This my people focus is impact focus. How do we make someone's life better, but also like still make money doing it? Like you can do both. We can. I promise we can. Like
Well, and Levar, how can people kind of reach out to you, get involved with what you're working on, and get in touch?
always the website is www.yogh.group. Yogh Group, Yogh.group. You can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm always there. I'm always posting something. I have my little rage moments. Don't get mad. Also, don't write me anything that says, I guess you're too busy. That really triggers me. And I immediately, persona non grata the whole entire company. I don't know. Like that was my one of my last posts on Instagram, like LinkedIn was like, hey, I don't know what's happened with professional communication, but this like passive aggressive, like angry voice that people are using in their emails, it doesn't turn me on. It doesn't make me want to do business with you. It shuts me down completely. So if I do not email you back or do not respond, I'm getting hit with a lot of things. And sometimes things get lost in my email box, or sometimes it goes to spam and I just don't see it. Or it goes into like one of those weird tabs that I don't know about.
The worst is to actually have some sort of executive title on LinkedIn. It almost opens you up to just massive amounts of messages that you then have to filter through and try and figure it out. And most of them are not helpful.
Yeah, you can again always LinkedIn's the easiest way because I can filter that fairly easily through their like things, and I just say, "Hey, I heard this podcast. You know, want to reach out? I have an idea." Like that stuff, absolutely fantastic. Um, yeah, so I think that's the best ways. There, Yogh Group Inc. is on LinkedIn, as well as da, 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 Instagram. I'm not as active as that company should be. Well, we've got some stuff coming. We've got some fun things coming. I'm always looking to collaborate, and if I can help, let me know. And I may not be able to buy from you, but I also have an extensive network. So if I can help you move your career along in a positive way, particularly around sustainability impact, let me know, and I'll gladly connect you with someone I do know.
Nice. Well, thank you just for taking the time and talking about the hospitality industry and energy and food. And I mean, just, I find your perspective on the world so refreshing, genuinely. And I think that that is one of the most wonderful things about what you do is your perspective, because it comes out in the products, it comes out in the way that you approach the problems. And I think that if that can be contagious, well, then let's let that be contagious, because I think it'll actually make the world a better place. So I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been an amazing chat. I know I talk in circles, but that is the madness that goes on in my head.
It's a good madness. It's a good madness for sure. Thank you so much for listening to the GOAT podcast. You are the reason why we exist and why we show up every single day.
You know, I've spent too many years being against stuff, and I've found now that it's a little bit easier and a little bit more fun to be for something.
How are we going to power the world? How are we going to build the world? How are we going to feed the world?
Company isn't just good or bad, black or white. Usually there's a lot more there, a lot more that I don't know.
It's actually about what you do in your daily life every day can make a huge difference.
Give this episode a share. Join our GOAT community. But most importantly, go spend some time in nature, because you might find it a meaningful reminder of the amazing place that we get to call home. I'm Steve Cassingham, and we'll see you next time.